Chapter 1 of Lone Star Planet by H. Beam Piper and John J. McGuire. Read by Mark Nelson. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Lone Star Planet, Chapter 1. They started giving me the business as soon as I came through the door into the secretary's outer office. There was Ethel Quang Lee, the secretary's receptionist, at her desk. There was Cortlandt Staines, the assistant secretary to the undersecretary for economic penetration, and Norman Gazarin from Protocol, and Toby Lauder from Humanoid People's Affairs, and Raoul Chevier and Hans Manteuffel and Olga Resnick. It was a wonder there weren't more of them watching the condemned man's march to the gibbet. The word that the secretary had called me in must have gotten all over the department since the offices had opened. "Ah, Mr. Machiavelli, I presume," Ethel kicked off. "Machiavelli, Jr.," Olga picked up the ball. "At least, that's the way he signs it." "God's gift to the consular service, and the consular service's gift to policy planning," Gazarin added. "Take it easy, folks. These hooligan diplomats would as soon shoot you as look at you," Manteuffel warned. "Be sure and tell the secretary that your friends all want important posts in the Galactic Empire," Olga again. "Well, I'm glad some of you could read it," I fired back. "Maybe even a few of you understood what it was all about." "Don't worry, Silk," Gazarin told me. "Secretary Gopal understands what it was all about. All too well, you'll find." A buzzer sounded gently on Ethel Quang Lee's desk. She snatched up the handphone and whispered into it. A deathly silence filled the room while she listened, whispered some more, then hung it up. They were all staring at me. "Secretary Gopal is ready to see Mr. Stephen Silk," she said. "This way, please." As I started across the room, Staines began drumming on the top of the desk with his fingers, the slow, reiterated rhythm to which a man marches to a military execution. "A cigarette?" Lauder inquired tonelessly. "A glass of rum?" There were 3 men in the Secretary of State's private office. Gopal Singh, the secretary, dark-faced, gray-haired, slender and elegant, meeting me halfway to his desk. Another slender man in black with a silver-threaded black neck scarf, Rudolf Klung, the secretary of the Department of Aggression, and a huge, gross-bodied man with a fat baby face and opaque black eyes. When I saw him, I really began to get frightened. The fat man was Natalenko, the security coordinator. "Good morning, Mr. Silk," Secretary Gopal greeted me, his hand extended. "Gentlemen, Mr. Stephen Silk, about whom we were speaking. This way, Mr. Silk, if you please." There was a low coffee table at the rear of the office, and 4 easy chairs around it. On the round brass tabletop were cups and saucers, a coffee urn, cigarettes, and a copy of the current issue of the Galactic Statesman Journal, open at an article entitled "Probable Future Courses of Solar League Diplomacy," by somebody who had signed himself Machiavelli, Jr. I was beginning to wish that the pseudonymous Machiavelli, Jr. had never been born, or at least had stayed on Theta Virgo 4 and been a wineberry planter, as his father had wanted him to be. As I sat down and accepted a cup of coffee, I avoided looking at the periodical. They were probably going to hang it around my neck before they shoved me out of the airlock. "Mr. Silk is, as you know, in our consular service," Gopal was saying to the others. "Back on Luna on rotation, doing something in Mr. Halvard's section. He is the gentleman who did such a splendid job for us on Asha, Gamma Norma 3. And, as he has just demonstrated," he added, gesturing toward the Statesman Journal on the Benares work table, "he is a student both of the diplomacy of the past and the implications of our present policies." "A bit frank," Klung commented dubiously. "But judicious," Natalenko squeaked, in the high, euconoid voice that came so incongruously from his bulk. He aired his singular accurate predictions in a periodical that doesn't have a circulation of more than 1,000 copies outside his own department. And I don't think the public's semantic reactions to the terminology of imperialism is as bad as you imagine. They seem quite satisfied now with the change in the title of your department from defense to aggression." "Well, we've gone into that, gentlemen," Gopal said. "If the article really makes trouble for us, we can always disavow it. There's no censorship of the journal, and Mr. Silk won't be around to draw fire on us." Here it comes, I thought. "That sounds pretty ominous, doesn't it, Mr. Silk?" Natalenko tittered happily, like a 10-year-old who has just found a new beetle to pull the legs out of. "It's really not as bad as it sounds, Mr. Silk," Gopal hastened to reassure me. "We are going to have to banish you for a while, but I dare say that won't be so bad. The social life here on Luna has probably begun to pall anyhow. So we're sending you to Capella 4. "Capella 4, I repeated, trying to remember something about it. Capella was a geo type like Sol. That wouldn't be so bad. "New Texas," Klung helped me out. Oh, God, no, I thought. "It happens that we need somebody of your sort on that planet, Mr. Silk," Gopal said. "Some of the trouble is in my department, and some of it is in Mr. Klung's. For that reason, perhaps, it would be better if Coordinator Natalenko explained it to you." "You know, I assume, our chief interest in New Texas?" Natalenko asked. "I had some of it for breakfast, sir," I replied. "Super cow." Natalenko tittered again. "Yes, New Texas is the butcher shop of the galaxy. In more ways than one, I'm afraid you'll find. They just butchered one of our people there just a short while ago. Our ambassador, in fact." That would be Silas Cumshaw, and this was the first I'd heard about it. I asked when it had happened. "A couple of months ago. We just heard about it last evening, when the news came in on a freighter from there, which serves to point up something you stressed in your article, the difficulties of trying to run a centralized, democratic government on a galactic scale. But we have another interest, which may be even more urgent than our need for New Texan meat. You've heard, of course, of the Zsrof?" That was a statement, not a question. Natalenko wasn't trying to insult me. I knew who the Zsrof were. I'd run into them here and there. One of the extrasolar intelligent humanoid races, who seem to have been evolved from canine or canine-like ancestors instead of primates. Most of them could speak basic English, but I never saw one who would admit to understanding more of our language than the 850-word basic vocabulary. They occupied a half-dozen planets in a small star cluster about 40 light-years beyond the Capella system. They had developed normal space reaction drive ships before we came into contact with them, and they had quickly picked up the hyperspace drive from us back in those days when the Solar League was still playing Missionaries of Progress and trying to run the galaxy-wide Point 4 program. In the past century, it had become almost impossible for anybody to get into their star group, although Zsrof ships were orbiting in on every planet that the League had settled or controlled. There were Zsrof traders and small merchants all over the galaxy, and you almost never saw one of them without a camera. Their little meteor mining boats were everywhere, and all of them carried more of the most modern radar and astrogational equipment than a meteor miner's lifetime earnings could pay for. I also knew that they were one of the chief causes of ulcers and premature gray hair at the League capital on Luna. I'd done a little reading on pre-spaceflight Terran history. I had been impressed by the parallel between the present situation and one which had culminated 2.5 centuries before, on the morning of 7 December, 1941. "What," Natalenko inquired, "do you think Machiavelli Jr. would do about the Zsrof?" "We have a Department of Aggression," I replied. "Its mottos are, 'Stop trouble before it starts,' and, 'If we have to fight, let's do it on the other fellow's real estate.' But this situation is just a little too delicate for literal application of those principles. An